I'm a CW guy. I don't know how this works. How's that? Everybody hear me? Okay. Free to get in, $5 to get out. Okay, no problem. Well, tonight, thanks for having me back. I come back about once a year and come back again after everybody's forgotten about the last talk. So we get a new one. This is a talk, a sort of a brain wrinkler kind of a talk. It's not too much of a prediction talk. Predictions are hard, particularly about the future. And mostly it's observations and suggestions about what's happening in the hobby, where we're going from the perspective of pretty much a lifelong ham. I've been a ham for a long time now. I was just a little guy, got my ham license. I'm a techie, I'm an author, I'm an editor, which would amaze my high school English teachers, I assure you. Kyle's given you my personal background. And I am an author and an editor, but I'll keep this talk free of any subliminal content whatsoever. So, okay. All right. So, how many people know what the golden age of ham radio is? Okay. It's the 5 years centered on whenever you got your license. Okay. Everything before that was a primitive wasteland. Everything after that has been going to hell in a handbasket. Okay. So if you just got your license, this is your golden age of ham radio. Okay. And everybody's got their golden age. This is when they got into the hobby, they really started enjoying it, and so you tend to carry that forward. And so where we find ourselves is after 100 years of what I call ham radio 1.0. 100 years of ham radio goodness. What have we been doing? It all looked kind of like that. Really? No, not really. But we've done amazing things with technical and operating advances. It's just night and day over the last 100 years. We've done some pretty amazing things with station building. You wouldn't believe some of the big stations. Have anybody ever looked at the K3LR website? It's right next to I-80. So as you drive west on I-80 and people come from New England to go to Dayton every year, there's a whole bunch of chatter on the reflectors and stuff. What's that big station? It's just east of the Ohio line. Is that the Voice of America? Well, on some weekends, it kind of is. Tim's got an enormous station. Some people have really put together some outrageously big and good and capable amateur stations. We're really very highly skilled in public service. We've gone from just being able to haul boxes out into the field, starting in 1930, it was a field day, and operate them to mobile communication vans and satellites and emergency data networks that pop up. We've hybridized with the internet. We have trucks and all sorts of things that can show up and fill in the gaps until the guys with the green trucks show up. We have all this information that's collected by individuals. Our LOTW is now the world's largest database of validated point-to-point contacts in the world. It has over 1 billion contacts going back to World War II and beyond. And so researchers are starting to take notice of this, and they can run their models against this and see if our data fits their models, things like that. All this information that hams have collected used to be that you could read QST cover to cover and you'd pretty much know everything that was going on in ham radio. Well, now there's QST, there's websites, there's YouTube, there's all this stuff, the other things that are online. It's an enormous amount of material that happens all the time. We have millions of hams worldwide. We have over 700,000 here in the United States. And gee, we got the most hams, we got the most frequencies, we have the best technology ever. So ham radio 1.0 has done pretty well. So it's over 100 years old. And those of you that know the great ragtime piano player U.B. Blake, he grew up in the barrel houses of New Orleans and never got expected to get to 103. Somebody asked him how he managed to live that long, and he said, always sit facing the door. So Okay, so where do we go now? Ham radio 2.0. We've done all this stuff, and I think we all sort of sense that ham radio is changing. There's a lot of technical change, there's operational change, there's demographic change, all these things. What's going on? So this is what I call, we're moving into ham radio 2.0. This is a big pivot after a lot of sort of building up and building up and building up, and now things are actually starting to change. There's a lot of different things going on in ham radio. The idea of stations is changing, as opposed to building up this big station in your backyard. And you know, the traditional thing was, well, you had a little tower or something, and you had some wire antennas and all this kind of stuff in your backyard. A lot of people don't have access to that now. People live in apartments, they live in condos, they live all over the place. They don't have access to that. So the idea of a station is changing. People are out walking around, they're doing things, they're hiking, they're driving, they're bicycling, they're doing all sorts of stuff. You've got satellites. You've got the guy up at the top, Steve, WG0AT. He's active in the Summits on the Air program. That's one of his pack goats. He goes up to, he rarely operates from home. He's always up on top of a mountain, and the goats haul the gear. Not bad. I wonder if that's a goat 2 kit. He does have 2 goats. Okay. So, all right. And we've got all these digital modes. This is the cool new stuff. FT8 came out in 2017 and set the world on fire. It's basically been almost Promethean for a large class of hams who could not communicate for whatever reason. Didn't have antennas, couldn't run high power, had a high noise level, blah, 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 blah. Joe Taylor and his team blew that away. You can now get on the air with a few watts, and you can contact all over the world on HF with this FT8 mode, and now there's FT4, which has just come along, sort of like a super RTTY. If you've heard the vacuum cleaners on the voice bands, that's digital voice, codec 2, invented by a ham. And so we've got digital voice technology. We've also got digital voice technology on the VHF bands, several competing systems right now. We've got digital codes and protocol that have enormous coding gain. EME, Earth, Moon, Earth, was revolutionized by K1JT and his team when he released JT65. It's as if Joe grabbed the moon and dragged it until it was about 90% of the way toward Earth. And now you can work EME with just a couple of Yagis and 100 watts like you get out of a standard multi-mode radio. It's just really revolutionized the hobby in a lot of ways. That little map down here, DX Maps, you can map what's going on worldwide. This was 6 meters last weekend. It's amazing. And so here's some of the gadgets that we have. SDR, software defined radio, is replacing nearly all of analog transceiver technology. And in a few years, you will not be able to buy a transceiver from the commercial manufacturer that is not almost all SDR. There'll be a little analog in the front end. There'll be some filters, might be some power supplies, maybe the RF amplifier will be analog. The rest of it will be this nice big square package with lots of little legs inside. And that'll be your radio. That's where the radio stuff goes. So back, it used to be my favorite programming language was solder. Well, now it's going to be an FPGA. You'll be hacking together things with GNU radio and stuff like that. Here's some examples. Up at the top is a thing called a red pitaya that was originally released as a test instrument for amateurs, amateur electronic guys to play with. And then the hams found out about this thing and made it into a radio. So it's a general purpose, originally made for to be an oscilloscope, but hams found out it could be a radio. You've got Raspberry Pis, you've got apps, you've got all sorts of interesting things. So SDR is basically blowing away all the old analog stuff. I was at a conference not too long ago, and a guy named Chris Testa, who was one of the fellows behind an effort called Whitebox to build a handheld of the future. And Chris was talking about developing this technology. And he was using a lot of this stuff from the cell phone world to make the radio sort of look and play the same way. And he said, gosh, I needed a signal source, so I wrote myself a transmitter. He just compiled some code, and the code went into this giant IC, and suddenly he had a transmitter that came out the other side. He wrote a transmitter. I just thought that's really a whole new paradigm when you just say, I'm just going to type it in, I'm going to compile, it's going to go into this chip, and I've got a transmitter. So that's kind of the new environment. Gigahertz is kind of interesting. It used to be, the guys my age, you'd say gigahertz, kind of wet our pants a little bit, you know, because that's serious stuff. You've got waveguide and mysterious microwave things and all these strange filters with screws and knobs and stuff. Gigahertz is nothing now. You go talk to the engineering students, engineering classes, anything below 1 gigahertz to them is baseband audio, okay? It is. They will put in a bandwidth of a gigahertz worth of data into their transmitting and receiving devices. So anything below 1 gigahertz to them is just, it's just the baseband data that they're going to shift back and forth. You're talking about 5G and the new cellular systems. They're all working up higher and higher and higher frequencies. This stuff is coming out at 30 gigahertz, 70 gigahertz car radars. We're going to get the benefit of that technology as it becomes a consumer item. Things that were science fiction are now coming to pass. You can buy them at the store. So gigahertz is no longer the barrier it once was. High-speed mesh networks. Anybody familiar with AREDN, Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network? Okay, a couple. What they've done is they've taken the Ubiquity AT&T routers and they hacked them. And just like we used to do with Motorola tube strips, now they take AT&T routers, rewrite the software for them, and they make mesh networks that you can go out and deploy. And you bring them up, they find each other. You've got a data network, they self-assemble. It's kind of an ad hoc sort of thing. And voila, we've got an AREDN, an emergency data network that you can take out these guys, put them up, poof, there they are. When the emergency's over, they go away. But this is all amateur inventing and using of new technology, both RF and networking. You get weird solar behavior, real-time ionospheric data now that we never had before. And everybody's on 6 meters now. You have these nice radios, they all have 6 meters on them, and we've got these new protocols, and we've got these new reporting things like that map I just showed you. 6 meters is open, and it's open almost every day somewhere. Used to be you had to sit there and listen to receiver hiss hour after hour after hour and hope that somebody would make a call on the calling frequency and that you might hear them. Now it's just contact after contact after contact. We're discovering multiple ES, sporadic E type hops, all kinds of strange propagation modes. And that's because technology has enabled us to all get on the air and enjoy it. You have dozens of tiny satellites. You have the AMSat Fox, you have AMSat Golf. The Region 1, the Eastern Hemisphere, has a 24/7 geosynchronous satellites on a Qatari Iridium platform that went up. Is that right, Tom? Qatari, right, QO100. Yeah, so they've got basically a geosynchronous satellite that gives them an entire hemisphere coverage 24/7, 365. And eventually there'll be one over here too. But right now it's only a Region 1 thing. You've got digital voice and data alongside analog modes everywhere. You tune around on the HF bands. There's some CW, then there'll be some digital. There'll be these strange little warbly tones. There'll be Olivia. Then there'll be some RTTY and all this kind of stuff. So it's all kind of mixing together. And then you've got what I call metadata, which is online, all this information about what you're doing. You make a contact and the RBN suddenly, the reverse beacon network, shoots out that it heard you wherever you are. You can get on the air, call CQ one time, and within 10 seconds you'll have been heard and digitized and reported by this network of receivers. And during the solar eclipse QSO party, the RBN and PSK Reporter and WhisperNet generated millions of spots, and the researchers used that to analyze what happened as that big eclipse went across the country. That's all brand new. So the technology changes are really huge, and they're really kind of as big a change as the IC was when it came out and changed everything from point-to-point wiring into these circuit board things. And as we know, technology really doesn't change smoothly, sort of stagnates for a while, stabilizes, and then it lurches to this whole new thing. It jumps. You get these big sort of sudden sea changes in things, and hams are changing too. And that sort of makes us nervous, okay? Because we would like to get used to things, we're comfortable with things, we have our golden age of ham radio, and now all of this is changing. All of it pulling the rug out from under us, what's going on, and so we get kind of nervous. But it's important to know that version 2 doesn't dump version 1.0, it builds on it. It's just like software. You get the next version of software, it carries forward these fundamentals, but we have to change. We have to change. We have to go along with this. We can't pretend to hold on to the old ways too long, or we'll be pushed aside. We've got a proposal in Europe right now that says, gee, what if we put the hams into a shared allocation with aeronautical on 144 to 146 megahertz. I don't know about you, but it's very difficult to share a service with some kind of big commercial enterprise. We've got to make sure that we are willing to change, update, be current, be relevant, because if we don't, there are plenty of other people who would like to use our service frequencies for their own thing. So we have to move. We don't necessarily like it, but we have to think about it. Okay, so I came up with the slogan Science, Service, Skill a while back. It's nice and punchy, and it sort of captures what's going on here. We need to build this covenant with all of the people that have come before. Ham Radio 1.0, 100 years worth. We need this covenant of that group saying, okay, what's really important? What's really important about ham radio that we need to carry through to this new environment where we get the science and the service and the skill? We can't latch too firmly to the technology, but what are the fundamentals? What's really important about amateur radio that we want to carry through? So let's talk about science, service, and skill. I think the ARL has decided to use the word discovery, but I'm an engineer, so I like science. So I'm going to stick with science. Science is the underlying signals and propagation physics that underlie radio. All that physics, all that engineering, the science, you got to have it. You got to have a power supply. You've got to have an oscillator. You've got to have an amplifier. You've got to have a feed line. You've got to have an antenna. And you got to deal with the troposphere or maybe the ionosphere. I don't know anybody that's made a contact from EasyNet to EasyNet yet. Okay, the modeling programs. You've got to have the real stuff. So you really have to grapple with the physics and the engineering of it. Even if you're just assembling things together, you still have to learn. And that's one of the things that the sort of the quid pro quo of hams. We're going to give you all this stuff, but you have to take a license. You have to learn something about this service, this hobby, and then we're going to turn you loose. Okay, but you're kind of on your own. You go to these other services like MURS or FRS or the commercial systems, and it's very cut and dried. You get a radio, you can't change the antenna, you can't hack it, you can only reprogram it if you're authorized to do so, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but it's kind of guaranteed that anybody can use it and it will work within a very narrow approach. Okay, but hams, you get everything. You get your radio. I know some guys, the first thing they do with the radio before they even use it is take it apart. Okay, take it apart, mess with it, see how it works. change it, optimize it. That's what we do. Okay, so we're going to grapple with the science of this. The service part is the teaching and the providing of communications to our communities. Okay, this is what we do when there's a problem. We go and we help out. We help out even when there's not a problem at parades. We go do these races and bike-a-thons and all this kind of stuff. We participate in weather reporting. We send messages back and forth. That's a service that we provide. The contests that we engage in, those were invented to practice providing this service. There's nothing in the FCC rules about having a good time or contesting or anything. That's practice. That's like this wax on, wax off, you know, in the Karate Kid. It's why you do physical exercise, so that you'll be strong and healthy. The skill part is the know-how, okay? That's using all this stuff effectively. You have to have great eyes, great ears, great fingers, whatever you've got that you can operate, you can build, you can repair, you can troubleshoot, you can direct. You've got to know all this stuff about ham radio, from how to coil up coax so it doesn't tangle. You got to pull stations out of the noise. You got to pick the right band for running a pileup or a net, all these different things. So everything about ham radio is you get everything from the wall plug to the ionosphere. And that's one of the reasons why hams are so well thought of in the communications industry, because they understand that everything counts. Everything counts from the wall plug all the way to the sky. Some things you have control over, some things you don't, but you got to know about it. So all these things are necessary to the continued success and evolution of amateurs and amateur radio. So we're going to take this forward. And all these things were true in 1.0. They're going to be true in 2.0. Okay, the technology is going to change. The people are going to change. The ways and means that we engage this stuff with is going to change. But it's going to change. We're going to carry this stuff forward. And it reminds me of, I don't know how many Robert Heinlein fans are. Okay, all right. The Notebooks of Lazarus Long, he was a hero in a book called Time Enough for Love. And there's a great quote that I'll read. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. Amateurs are the same way. You need to be able to fix a connector, run a net, make a contest contact, look up in the sky, figure out what's going on, all these different things. Hams get to do all this stuff. All the other services push that aside. They say, we're going to constrain you. You don't have to get a license, but you only get to use these radios in certain ways. Hams are completely different. Wide open. Here you go. Have at it. When I teach engineering students, I can tell who's got ham experience or some kind of hobby experience. They are not afraid of knobs. They'll walk up to the instruments. Hands are on. Tweak, 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 tweak. What's this do? Pin, 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 pin. And everybody else is like, whoa, that's an instrument. I don't know. Hams are completely different. They're right in there. So you learn how to do all this stuff. You don't specialize. We're expected to go forth and multiply and do our thing. So we've got some challenges out there. The new stuff is coming along. The challenges are opportunities. I'm going to sound like typical management here. You know, it's like, opportunities are problems are our opportunities. I promise I won't use the word passion, okay, or leverage here. One of the challenges is Ham Radio 1.0 had this 2D view of the radio spectrum. Okay, it's one long thing. It's one big long string that goes from the low frequencies over here to the high frequencies over here. Stations are these little beads along the string, and we tune from one to the next. And the better a receiver is, the more of those beads it throws away. Okay, but basically this is a linear 2D kind of view of the spectrum. The Ham Radio 2.0 view of the spectrum has a lot more dimensions to it. There's all this other information that's coming out. We get it from the internet, we get it from ham radio. So if you've got this other set of things that you can do with it, you can come up with new visualizations. I think we all sort of, as we're tuning our radio around, we sort of think of stations going from one spot to another. Well, now you can throw in all this different information. If I can decode a signal off the air with these little decoder, CW decoder apps, I can take that information and I can go to qrz.com and I can pull up a web page. I can take your picture off. I can put that there. So when I tune you in on my receiver, I see your picture. I see your background. I see your station. I see where you are. I see what your country's like. I see your national flag. I can speak to you in your national language, badly. And I can do all these different things because all this other information is there. I can put on augmented reality goggles. AI6TK, Jerry Ellsworth and her company are putting together this augmented reality stuff. And she showed us out at Visalia a really interesting thing where you put on these glasses and you looked at a screen, and what it projected on the screen was the spectrum of signals that were coming in around. So you could see all this stuff going on. That was just a prototype. So this is all coming. Imagine if you could stand out in your backyard and look up into the sky and see what your antennas see. And you say, oh, there's an 80-meter signal. It's coming in from New York at about, I don't know, about 45 degrees up there. And by golly, it's W2ABC. And I went out there and I grabbed that stuff off of QRZ, and there's his picture up there in the sky. And over here on 20 meters down low, well, there's those guys on Bechuana Island. I don't know, and so they're rocketing along over there. And here's some people over here from California and so on and so forth. So that's coming. And information is all out there. Simple matter of programming, the four most dangerous words in the English language. So that's being integrated together. We're going to find out all sorts of new ways to look at amateur radio. But another challenge is noise, and I mentioned this earlier. Okay, the noise is coming up. Okay, the noise floor is coming up. We've got variable frequency drive washing machines, better known as RFI volcanoes, in our neighborhood. We've got Ethernet stuff. We've got switching supplies. Every little wall wart seems to be a little noise blaster. All these different things. We've got noise coming up and coming up and coming up. Those of you that are communications engineers know that the ITU came out with this graph in the 1970s that had this set of noise spectra, noise levels, and they would say, here's your urban noise floor, starting at, down below the AM broadcast band up into VHF. And then it would progressively get lower as you moved away out into the quiet rural, and then it was down here. Well, by conservative estimates, that's at least 10 dB too low now. That is all moving up because of the electromagnetic smog that's coming out of all of our stuff. And wait till they get to wireless power transfer and start charging every car with electricity as opposed to gasoline. So you can imagine the noise floor is going to come up. So we're not going to solve that through regulation. Nobody is going to go out and pick up all the little Chinese wall warts that are emitting noise above and beyond what they're allowed to and put them all back in a container and send them back across the Pacific. It ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so we can either fold up our tent and go away, or we can do what they did in the 1930s. 1930s, public safety and commercial interests were using AM radio. They're mobile things, and they were talking back and forth on AM. But the noise was killing them, particularly in the summer. Atmospherics, they called it back then. And so they didn't pitch the whole thing. What they did was convert to FM. FM, because it has this limiter stage, strips away all the amplitude modulation on the signal. So you trade a little range, but you get noise-free communications. So by using a different type of modulation, different type of radio, different type of technology, they were able to overcome that noise. We can do the same thing. You're starting to see it with FT8, FT4, all these other noise-tolerant modes that can dig deep down into the noise and still give you communications. So we can address this stuff. Antenna restrictions. But you can't put up this big tower and stuff. Sorry, it's not going to be solved by regulations. It's just not. Okay? I mean, it's a valiant try to go out and write it into the law that we all have to get our towers and stuff up. The money is not on our side. Okay? Not going to happen. Even if there is some kind of a law written, you're still going to have to deal with your homeowner associations, your CC&Rs, all these different things. It's going to make it difficult for us to put up these big antennas that we're accustomed to. Well, noise-tolerant modes. You can now put up a small antenna. You can use one of these noise-tolerant modes, and you can still work all over the world. If you talk to people who have been around for a long time, they wax rhapsodic about 1959. I'm kind of tired of hearing about 1959, but it was a good year, and how they could load up the bed springs on 10 meters AM and work the world. How many times have you heard that? Okay. We can do the same thing right now with FT8 and FT4. We can load up the bed springs and we can work the world with 10 watts. It's not made up. You can do that. I've done it. You don't have to have a big antenna and stuff like that. So if we're not going to be permitted to put up these giant antennas, then we're going to have to work around that. We're going to have to do something else. Remote stations, portable stations, mobile stations, all those are answers. So we have the ability to address this, but we're going to have to change the way that we operate and construct our stations. We're going to need to have new MCOM services. The existing public and government communication services are much more robust than they used to be. They've all been hardened. So the idea that hams are going to show up and replace FEMA is probably not going to happen all that much longer. But there are lots and lots of opportunities for us to provide other services that they need. What are those services? We need to find that out. We need to equip ourselves and train to do that. If we continue to act as if we were in the 1960s, we're not going to be invited to the table anymore. We need to provide something that's needed in 2020, not 1965. So we have to address this challenge by upping our game, changing our game. Also, ubiquitous connectivity. So you go out and you say, at Thanksgiving, you've got some new relatives that have come in, and they say, I hear you're a ham radio operator. Oh, yes, I'm ham radio. And you start with the fire hose, okay? Yes, you start telling them everything, and they go, well, I got this phone here. I can talk to any place in the world. Just do this, and why do I need ham radio? Okay, well, you don't need ham radio to necessarily just to talk to any place in the world. But there are a lot other things that we can do, but we have this competition for brain cycles now. Back when I was just getting started, the internet didn't exist yet. Ham radio was it. If you wanted to be cool, techie, the only thing you had was ham radio, and maybe you could steal some cycles on a teletype to a big mainframe someplace. Everything has changed now, so we have to compete. We just have to figure out cool stuff and do it. There is no better attractive thing than doing something that looks like it's fun out where other people can see you doing it. It means you have to get out of the basement. I'm sorry, you have to get out of the basement, and you have to go someplace to where other people are, and you have to show them what ham radio is and tell them a story. Once you've got a story, you've got them interested, they'll listen. Okay, clubs and social media are changing. Clubs are having a difficult time because people join and meet differently than they used to. Okay, particularly younger people under 40. Okay, younger people under 40 tend to view meetings and societies and all this kind of stuff completely differently. They may not need to come and meet and subject themselves to Robert's Rules of Order for an hour. Okay, they will want to do something else. So how do we have organizations in this new, brave new ham radio 2.0 world? So something to think about. Okay, so when we're confronted with all this stuff, all right, how do you decide what to do? Okay, so this is what I call the good arrow. Now, the good arrow is when you're out there in business or something else and you're confronted with a difficult problem and you have all these competing variables and data points and all this kind of stuff, and you're trying to make a decision, you may not be able to look at a book and look up the answer to every little question. So you have to make a decision on your own. You have to make a decision on the fly. And you have to understand where are the good arrow points so you can say, well, this decision sort of lines up well with that good arrow. So I'm going to go that way. And then we're going to see how it works out. So in radio, this is where I think the good arrow points. Understanding radio's physical environment. That means propagation. It means signals. It means the physics of it. What's going on with radio? Anything that helps me understand radio better, that's lined up with the good arrow. Anything that improves my efficiency and accuracy and my breadth of expertise about radio, that lines up with the good arrow. Does it encourage technical learning about communications? That's part of the good arrow too. How about developing new radio services and techniques? Very much part of the good arrow. How about creating new opportunities for building and innovation? Amateur radio is all about that. We've been doing it for 100 years. The pace is just accelerating. And then there's building a worldwide community of hams. Some of you out there are probably going, this looks familiar. This is kind of vaguely familiar. What is that? Well, it's a poorly formatted slide. That's what it is. Okay. This is part 97.1. This is our basis and purpose. It's the very first rule in part 97. If you look at it, 97.1a through E, basically this is what it's about. Okay, now part 97.1, it's our basis and purpose. It's a set of requirements for us to keep access to our spectrum. It is not a check that got cashed in 1932 because hams were such great persons that they decided to give us these national parks on the air and forever. We have to keep justifying our access by following this good arrow. Okay, so we've got opportunities, all right? Well, the opportunities are obligations. First of all, we need to know the sciencey bits. Okay, we have to carry on and teach people all these things that we know about electronics, like what the color code means. You know what? There are no more color codes. Have you gone and looked at inside a box lately? You open up the box and you look at it. What you see is a bunch of pepper bits. You look in there, and I mean, I can't see this stuff. Okay, you get out your magnifying glass, you still can't see that stuff. Get out the microscope, there you can see some stuff. There are no color codes anymore. There are no tiny little people with tiny little paintbrushes painting bands on resistors. I'm just crushed, okay? So we've got these opportunities. We're going to have to learn from others with different skills and different techniques and different backgrounds and interests. These are our obligations, okay? We have our skills, they have theirs, so we have these obligations to learn them. So what we need to do is look for these widely recognized events like eclipses to invite others into our hobby. This was down at the MUST, better known as University of Missouri at Rolla back in the day. And so they took the radio stuff outside. How many people operated during the eclipse? A few, okay. We had fun. And so they took the radios outside on campus where everybody was out there looking at the eclipse. And if you operated during the eclipse, you got extra points during the QSO party and all this stuff. And they had people coming over all day long. Astronomers have this thing called sidewalk astronomy. Take your telescope out and put it on the sidewalk where people are. Sure, if you want to see the Trifid Nebula, you go out someplace where it's really dark and far away from everything else, and you look up in a dark sky. But that doesn't teach anybody else about astronomy. So if you want to teach somebody else about astronomy and get them interested, you have to take the telescope to where they are. Most people have never looked through a telescope at the moon. That's the easiest possible thing. They look at it, maybe they've looked at it through binoculars. You look at the moon through a telescope, or the moons of Jupiter, or the rings of Saturn. They're up right now, okay? You go out there, you look to the south tonight, Jupiter is right there. You get your binoculars out, you can see 4 moons of Jupiter, easy. A little bit later, Saturn comes along. Saturn, you can see the rings, they're nice tipped over. It's really pretty cool. But you've got to get this out there to where people can see it. If you read the astronomy magazines, they sound just like the ham radio magazines. Oh, these kids today, they haven't ground a mirror, they don't know anything. They haven't boiled any linseed oil to paint a wooden telescope tube, all this kind of stuff. Where are we going to get the kids? Where are they? There's only old astronomers, blah, blah, blah. You could take astronomy and telescopes out, put amateur radio and radios right into that. So they have the same thing to be concerned about. Okay, so we got to get out there. We got to tell our story. So you give presentations, you bring your tools, you bring your gear, you go any place you can where there's a technical or an emergency type of communications element. Go there. Tell your story, bring your stuff, show up for people. You know how to get a lot of kids interested? Go to the ball fields, the soccer fields out there, the ones that aren't underwater right now, okay? And you go out there and you set up your portable station and you put a little, little tape up and you put a little sign out there that says, free cookies, ham radio, open house. And you'll have a steady stream of kids coming over. What you doing? Can I do that? Can I touch that? Have 2 people. One is explaining, the other one's going, no, 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 no. Okay. They'll be over there all day long, be dragging their older brothers and sisters and their parents over. You get to tell the story. They may have never seen an amateur except in the movies, and the movies are always so accurate, right? Okay. So this is your chance to tell our story in public. Use online tools, your modeling techniques, all these things that hams learn how to do. Take these to makerspaces, take them to Arch Reactor, take them to Boy Scouts, take them to the robotics thing. Give a class, give a course, show how to do something, and hybridize. Don't be afraid to do something that is not pure ham radio. Okay, I know that we would all of us have taken the plunge. We're all nuns for Hiram, okay? And our whole life is about ham radio, QST, devoted entirely to ham radio. That's what Ellen says. I am QST. I'm devoted entirely to ham radio. Okay, do something that is kind of a combination. A bike ride, a boat ride, athletics, all these different things. How many people are geocachers? Okay, there's this thing called geofoxing, and I stole it from somebody in California. They were doing this thing where you take a geocacher, often a kid, okay, got a smartphone, you got a geocache op, okay, you put out a geocache someplace, and so you send them off with a ham, partner them up. First thing is the geocache. Give them the coordinates, off they go. They find the cache. What's in the cache? It's the frequency of a hidden transmitter. Okay, now the emphasis switches over to the ham. They got one of these tape measure Yagis or something like that. And they go, and the kid's going, what you doing, mister? How's this work? Blah, 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 blah. And then they find a hidden transmitter. What's at the hidden transmitter? Another set of coordinates. Okay, so then it flips back to the geocacher. Off you go. You go find the cache, you get the hidden transmitters, you go back and forth until you run out of hidden transmitters, basically. That's sort of a hybrid activity that we can show the value proposition of amateur radio without demanding that somebody convert completely to the Church of Ham Radio. Okay, so where do these opportunities exist? Somebody mentioned robotics earlier. First robotics, I'm talking with some robotics people about at the Hamvention next year having a hidden transmitter hunt where the hunters are drones, okay? So we put hidden transmitters around the fairgrounds and the drones have to go find the transmitters. So it's a combination of robotics and ham radio. So it's a merge. Ham radio is just not a cable replacement here. It's an integral part of the process. I don't know if we're going to get that done or not, but we're going to give it a try. Makers, modelers, bikers, hikers, campers, boaters. I would like to have the iron ham competition where you go out and you make contacts while you're running, while you're bicycling, while you're paddling away. I realize that would kill 90% of the hams right off the bat. Okay. But those that survive, it would be fun, you know. Uh-oh, looks like he's out of the running. So anyway, that would be kind of fun. Let's do some interesting things. Field biology, environmental projects can also benefit greatly from ham radio. They used to do this thing where we would track the burrowing owls. Remember the burrowing owls? As they would migrate, hams would listen. They would report on what they heard as the owls moved back south. I don't know if there are any more burrowing owls, but we don't have to listen for them anymore. There are also other opportunities. This is a new thing that started in Europe a few years ago, and it has taken off like wildfire. It's called Youngsters on the Air, and it's all run by them. This is not a bunch of old people running something for the young people to do. It's young people got together. They said, we want to do stuff that we're interested in, and so the oldsters, the contest clubs, whatever, they help facilitate the hotel, the grounds, whatever they need. But then back off, let these guys do what they want, okay? It's their thing. And they're having camps every year. They have conventions. They have special operating events. They have young contesters program. And you can see they're all learning something. There's a technical component. There's an operating component. There's a social component. Did I mention the drinking age in Europe is 16? Okay, they're having a great time. They have a rule at the conference that if you get sick and throw up from alcohol, you have to go home. Okay, so you have to behave. There's going to be a YOTA 2020 for Region 2 here in the United States next year for the first time at the Voice of America Museum in Westchester, Ohio, WC8VOA. And they're starting to put that together. So watch for some news on that. 20, 30 campers will show up and do exactly this kind of thing. So that's where it starts. You also have the Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative. This was started by the ARRL. And so all these clubs, many of which were moribund after years of inactivity, they're starting to come back online. We've got a Facebook page. We've got lots and lots and lots of different clubs. They're starting to share ideas. They're starting about projects. They're competing in contests, all this kind of stuff. And they're having a great time. And it's their thing. They are doing their thing. We're handing that off to them for them to do what they want to do in a way that makes sense to them. We're not trying to have them duplicate what it is that we do. There's also HAM-SCI, Ham Science Citizen Investigation. The first big event was the Solar Eclipse QSO Party in August of 2017. And that's been really, really well accepted by the professional research community, which is now starting to get much more interested in geophysics and ionospheric science after 30 or 40 years of non-interest. As climate change comes up, more atmospheric dynamics, all this solar minimum stuff, the researchers are starting to get back into this, and they've discovered the hams are here. And hams are very good and very motivated, and they will take high quality data. So the HAM-SCI guys, these are all researchers from various institutions, and they've got lab coats. Woo! Oh, that's right, Dr. Science. So Nathaniel here, W2NAF, he was the Ham of the Year this year at Dayton. He's sort of the lead dog on all this. We've got a bunch of programs going on, and we're starting a program called the Personal Space Weather Station. Anybody have a personal weather station for Weather Underground here? There's one, there's a hand, there's a hand. What you do is you put up your measurement stuff, and then you set up some software so that you report automatically to Weather Underground. And so when you go and you say, give me the weather in Troy, Missouri, whoever is up there in Troy, Missouri, they're the station. And so you see what they're reporting right now, real time. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the same thing but for space weather. We're going to start with the magnetometer. We can have an SDR that digitizes data. And this will all go into a big database, and the research community will be able to make use of that. They'll be able to design experiments so that we have very focused efforts. But we want everything from the second grade science club at an elementary school to be able to put up a very simple thing all the way to very sophisticated, highly skilled, highly instrumented stations from retired Hewlett-Packard engineers that just happen to have a rubidium atomic frequency standard in the basement, and they exist. Okay, so we want to get this whole community involved. So this is a big opportunity for people to really participate. There's also this thing called SatNOGs, Satellite Network on Ground Station. You build this thing, it's all 3D printed, all the gears and stuff like that. You put your satellite antennas on it, you hook it up to the internet, and what you do is you say, hey, you've got a pass of this satellite with this set of Keplerian orbital elements at such and such a day. Would you grab the telemetry off of it? So this thing sits there, it's got a little controller, maybe a Raspberry Pi, maybe a PC, whatever. And it goes, oh, time to go. It goes like this, and it watches the thing go across the sky completely on its own, sucks down the telemetry, and sends it to the database. So that's something that you or your school or your club or whatever can put up all by yourself. And you can use it to transmit too. When you're not doing telemetry, hook up your rig to it and say, here comes Fox 1. I'm going to grab it. So you can do all sorts of interesting things with that. Make sure whatever we do, it's really important that the lowest rung of the ladder is low enough for interested hams and new people, people who aren't quite hams, all this kind of stuff, so they can get onto it. Okay? If we make it too complicated, too weird, too exotic, then the average person can't get to it. So we have to create an on-ramp into ham radio where people come up and do simple things. One of the things I'd like to see us do is, you know, there's a light category for a VHF contest. Everybody goes out and they make their one light contact with a flashlight across the parking lot. They're good, they go home. Well, you don't need a license to do light contacts, do you? Anybody can go out there with a laser pointer. So why are we not having light competitions that involve non-licensed hams as part of our competitions? Have a non-licensed category. What about ultrasonics? You know those bat detectors where you can put on the headphones and you can listen to bugs and bats? You can also transmit on ultrasonics without a license. And that's almost the same. You've got your antennas, you're trying to find other people, you're trying to make contacts. We can involve people in the fun, the general flavor of amateur radio without requiring them to pick up this giant book and pass a 450 question possible exam and learn all this stuff. I've given teenagers the book, okay? They say, wow, this sounds great. How do I get some of this? And I go, well, first you have to get licensed. Okay, what have I got to do? How much does it cost? They say, well, you buy this book. Wham! And they go, gotta go. So it's really hard to get people to be motivated enough to get over that hump, to get to ham radio. So how are we going to do that? We got all this competition for all these brain cycles. How are we going to pull them in? Well, we're going to do interesting and cool stuff. Who's going to be the first ham on Mars? There was a QSO this last month, a couple of weeks ago. Somebody made a contact through a repeater that was orbiting the moon. Okay? It went all the way out, and it was some kind of digital repeater on a Chinese satellite that was going around the moon, and it came back. It was between a German and somebody in China. Now, how cool is that? Okay? We're going to be going out to Mars any day now. So who's going to be the first ham on Mars? We don't know. To boldly go where no ham has gone before. Okay, so the whole point of this is to get out there and do something fun, involve people. This is the truth. The more you do anything that don't look like advertising, the better advertising it is. Okay? if you're out there and you're having a good time and people are seeing you have a good time, they want a piece of that. Help them. Okay? Help them by doing simple things, hybridize with whatever it is that they're interested in, build them an on-ramp into ham radio, and then they'll take off. And they'll teach us something as they come along as well. So you got to get outside your box. Everybody comes in through one of the doors and they do their own interesting thing. Okay, so a miracle has occurred and you've got your license. Now, say you got into it through MCOM. You wanted to serve your community. You saw one of these people. That's how I met the St. Charles Club. I went out to do Race for the Rivers, and Ellen and I have our canoe, and we're marching down to the shore, and there's this guy with all the ham radio gear over there. I go, excuse me. So walk over there. Turns out to be KG0KP from the St. Charles Club. He was the Weldon Spring Station. Hi, how you doing? We meet here, we do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, get outside your box. Here you come through the door. All right, so you come through the door and you've gone to breakfast with these guys about 2 years now on Saturday. That's another thing. Breakfast on Saturday morning. When I was under 30, I didn't get out of bed until noon on Saturday, okay? So breakfast on Saturday is a non-starter for most young, active, socially involved people, okay? You gotta have meetings when they are awake, okay? Now anyway, okay, but it starts to lose its sizzle. So go mingle, okay? New hams, you don't have to sign up to do the same thing forever. You can do all these different things. And that balances you out, okay? In ham radio 2.0, it's going to be important to be balanced. There's going to be a little digital component. There's going to be some analog. There's going to be some antennas. There's going to be some amplifiers. There's going to be some network stuff. It's all going to kind of stew together into this new thing. So we need to get out of our boxes and move around a little bit. Anybody done any contesting? Yeah, sure. Go out in a DX contest. You know what you're listening to? You're listening to the world turning. You listen to the world turn, you can literally hear the world turn for 48 hours as you sit there and you listen to the bands open and close. From the Galapagos Islands, I've listened to sunrise sweep across from the Ural Mountains all the way to the Atlantic Ocean while I'm working guys on 80 meters CW. And you can hear them come up and come down in a matter of seconds sometimes. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. It's so cool. It's a great story for people to say, what do you do that for? You go in your basement for 48 hours and you come out and you look like crap and you're tired and your butt hurts. What do you do that for? I say, I love listening to the world turn. And they go, what? You go, got 'em. That, you got a story. They want to know, what do you mean you can hear the world turning? Okay, so what about VHF or microwave? You go out and you do some roving, go out and do a mountaintop. There's a 222 and up contest coming up, September QSO party. Just had the CQ VHF. Go out to a high spot. If you don't have a big station at home, just make a halo, make a dipole for crying out loud. Go out, put it on a painter pole, lash it to the side of your car, go drive to a high spot, and operate for a while. It's a tremendous amount of fun. Summits on the air. There are a few summits here in the Missouri. You can walk up to the top of Tom Sauk, put that on the air. It's great fun. What about meteor scatter? Coming up Sunday, Monday, the Delta Aquarids. You can download the free WSJTX software, hook it up to your radio. If you're running FT8, it's already in there. And you can run MSK 144. 6-meter dipole or a halo will make you some contacts and you can hear the burn. Sometimes I'll just, okay, I need a life, but I'll just turn on the 6-meter radio and I'll just listen. And when the meteors are coming in, you'll hear a burn and all of a sudden you'll hear as MSK 144 grabs the codes coming off of your audio. And it's really pretty neat to think that you're hearing this signal bounce off this meteor trail coming in. So they have contests, all this kind of stuff. Do some meteor scatter, listen to that. Remember that Nobel Prize winner K1JT got his start in amateur radio doing ionospheric scatter stuff with his brother back in high school. That's where it all got started, doing that kind of thing. You can volunteer with your local service groups. We got any Skywarn people here? Skywarn is great. Kids can do it, and they love doing it because they are contributing at a peer level. Okay? It's not like, oh, you're a kid. No, it's you are a Skywarn spotter number blah, 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 and you are here, and what do you see? Okay? That's important. They can contribute. They're a part of the community. Amateur radio is important to them, and that's how they do it. So that's a real opportunity for involving the public, in particular younger hams. You're talking about getting more youth involved. Okay, what about a road rally? You go out and do Race for the Rivers. I got to ride around in a boat all day with a state biologist as a chase boat going up and down the Missouri. It was fascinating. He told me all about these biology things I had no idea, and I told him all about ham radio, and he had no idea. So we spent the whole day educating each other about what we did. Okay, so get outside your box and do all these different things. This is one of my favorite cartoons from QST. It's perfect. That's me after a contest. Okay, so William Gibson. I'm kind of getting to the end here. Oh, yay! William Gibson is a groundbreaking science fiction author. Okay, he's the guy who came up with Johnny Mnemonic, I think, and Neuromancer, and all these other cyber type space stories and heroes and stuff that really set science fiction on its ear. And he has this great quote. He says, "The future is unknowable, so you can't know exactly what they're going to think of us. But just as our view of the past changes, the future will have different and more evolved information tools through which to look at what it knows about us. The future will probably know more about what we're actually doing than we do." Okay? Because if it stays history long enough, it doesn't have to be secret anymore. Our world and its various machinations will be more transparent to future historians than they are to anyone today. It's hard to tell what's going on. He also said, the future is already here, it's just not very well distributed. Okay? That's what ham radio is. If you go to the Hamvention and you see all these different groups doing all these little strange things, it's really cool because technology is suddenly enabling enormous numbers of strange little things to pop up. And so it's just a question of how do we integrate them? How do we get out of our own little rut? It's hard to tell a groove from a rut, isn't it? Okay, so how do we get out and go do these other little things? There's also this book called 200 Meters and Down. Anybody read that? Okay. It was written in 1936 by Clinton DeSoto. He was a very well-written, very influential guy in ham radio, but he never got his license. He's the guy that came up with the idea of DXCC back in the 30s. So ham radio really couldn't be more typical at any time than what Gibson was talking about. You could take what Gibson was talking about and say it in 1919, and it would be just as true as it is today in 2019. But Clinton DeSoto gave an example right in the closing paragraphs of 200 Meters and Down. It was written in 36, anticipating the coming of television and how that would fundamentally change the technical nature of ham radio. Yet he was confident, and he was right, that the Society of Amateurs would persevere. The connections we all have with each other, the things that we do, that we share, that we build, that some things we discard, some things we invent. We put together this new stuff that's going on. And that hams would continue to innovate and change, building on and rediscovering the past as they rushed headlong into the future. It's really hard to see where we're going, but you have to have confidence that we've been through this before, and all the tools are there, and the people are there, and that's what's the important thing. Important thing is to be willing to turn around and look out the windshield and watch this all going on. Very interesting from the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska. When I say the word future, the first syllable already belongs to the past. Things are really changing. I think that's how you pronounce her name. A Polish friend told me that all Polish surnames are pronounced Krzyzewski. I don't know. But I really found this to be true. Jim Maxwell, W6CF. Here's a guy, he had 2 doctorates. He worked for Lockheed out in California as a senior technical fellow, and the guy knew everything. He had 2 garages full of every publication ever printed in amateur radio. During the Loma Prieta earthquake, the bookshelves fell on him. He was out there and he was almost squashed by his ham radio collection. And he became a director of the Pacific Division back in about the early 90s. And he told me one time he could also spin limericks just off the top of his head. And if you gave him a couple of drinks, dirty limericks. It was really good. Okay, so Jim's talking to me about this stuff, and he says, you know, I thought I knew everything about ham radio. I'd been in ham radio for 50 years. I'd done all these things, all the way from building my own stuff to using the latest gear. And he says, I started going around the division, like directors do, and he said, I had no idea. I had no idea there was so much going on in ham radio. I'd go to a club, they were doing something new, there was a different kind of emergency communications group, there was a repeater club, there was this, there was that, there were these guys with instrumentation in the basement like you wouldn't believe. He said, I had no idea. I was just floored. I'm totally humbled by the breadth of experience and expertise that's out there. So we all have to kind of carry that around with us. We all have our favorite stuff, but we have to be willing to sort of rub elbows with other people and change and expand that as we go forward. So Ham Radio 2.0 is really incredibly exciting. I can't tell you what it's going to be. I can't tell you to go out and buy this and hook it to that and you'll be able to do something else. Okay, can't do that. But I can see all kinds of new technologies coming together, and they're going to change the way that we operate and open up a whole new set of services, activities, and goals, and we will still talk about the weather. Okay? But a whole new group is coming into ham radio. They have come already. They're already here. Some of us are turning into new groups. And they're discovering on their own terms what we refer to as the magic of radio. But they come by different paths. They have different life experiences. So it's our job as the people that have been here for a while, the same 10 people, I love that, the same 10 people. Okay, we have to turn amateur radio loose, trust ourselves, give it to them, hand off that baton. Here, take it, and take pride in what we have accomplished. And then know that we have ensured its future for another century by doing that. But we have to set it loose. We have to give it up. We have to be willing to go on. But that's Ham Radio 2.0. Thank you very much. I'll take questions. I'll take 10s and 20s. Okay. Yes.
And some of the things they're doing, and it reminded me, I was reading field notes a few months ago of, I forget the name of the group, but they were working with whooping cranes.
Okay.
Which, they've got enough now out in the wild, and they're all over the place, and a lot of times they can't find them because they're down in the swamps. And in swampy areas, you don't have necessarily a lot of roads. These guys are driving around with their, I don't know, VHF or UHF.
Right.
They're trying to find the cranes that are down there. And I'm like,
and you're like, a ham. She's talking about biologists trying to track, you're trying to track cougars and cranes and all these different things. And the biologists have tools, you know, and they sort of, well, you can buy this and the little transmitters and stuff, but they don't have that radio know-how.
It's not a difficult problem, really.
It's not a difficult problem if you have the radio know-how. If you don't have the radio know-how, it's impossible. Okay? So that little tiny thing, hams can help with this, you know. So
you mentioned that. My wife and I were in an RV in the Badlands last week, and these mountain goats are running around with rubber ducky antennas on their back. And we're like, oh, what is that? But I think it's what you were just talking about. Mountains on the air.
Yep. Isn't that great? Yeah, you can go out and you can find all this stuff. Hams have a lot of expertise, and not just about radio. When you go out, they keep telling us this in MCOM training, is when you go out, you're a force multiplier, okay? And whatever they need you to do, you do, okay? It may be copying, you know, things for handouts and stuff, but once they find out you're a ham, they know, even the rankest technician knows more about radio than 95% of everybody else in the United States, okay? You know, push to talk means release to listen. I've done CERT training. We had to spend a half an hour on that. You know, it's like, okay, now let go. Who knew? You know, I mean, literally, who knew? You know, you're not born knowing this stuff. Okay, so hams have a lot of expertise to share. Yeah.
What is your favorite general ham radio podcast?
Podcast. I don't have time for. The favorite thing I like to do is to in that general kind of sense of stuff is to go to YouTube and just kind of let it run, you know, watch it, and then let it find some other damn thing, you know, and just kind of, I'm just like eating the popcorn and go, wow, wow, you know, and then the electro boom guy shows up, you know, with his sparks and his shocks and stuff. But don't worry about having to know everything about everything. You just let this stuff kind of go by. You'd be amazed at what people are doing, what they're building and inventing and stuff like that. Other questions? Well, thank you.
Bill had a question.
Oh, Bill,
Oh.
do you have a question?
Question?
Vision walking into a junior college electronics circuits 1 course and put 3 words on the board. And it's math, chemistry, and physics. And see how many people run for cover.
Oh, yes. And Mark Kelly said that last night on the Year in Space program on Channel 9. He said we need more people that are math, science, engineer, physics to get into government so that we have more expertise about how things actually function to combine with the social and political aspects. So it's a balancing act that's kind of gotten out of whack. Yes?
Well, I do have a question. You were talking about digital modes and smaller antennas. So when is digital voice going to take off? On HF, I mean.
Oh, on HF. Well,
It's been so-
it's one of these things. Is there a killer app for it? I think it'll take off when the sunspots come back. Because right now, about all you've got for digital voice on HF is codec 2 that runs on, and it runs on 20 meters, because 20 meters is about the only band open right now. And so it's crowded, and you get interference, and people are banging elbows and stuff. But when 15 meters, which is enormous, and 10 meters start opening up again, I think you'll see it. I think you'll see it go.
Okay. You mean, so HF will mostly, so the digital voice will stay pretty much at 20?
Yes. Right now, it's pretty much a few little narrow areas on 20 meters, and 20 is so busy.